This is a real B&H customer story. Jack and Barbara, professional wildlife photographers and B&H customers for 30 years.
And Montgomery Public Schools will not pay a dime. Our firm pays all of the litigation expenses. And again, unless there's a recovery, no expenses will be paid by the Montgomery Public Schools. So there's no financial risk. And number two, the litigation that will be very minimal in time from the school district. Again, there are almost 200 cases nationwide. We see that number probably doubling or tripling over the next few months. And the court has already selected the first 12 cases that will go to trial nationally. And so for Montgomery Public Schools to participate, it would require filing a complaint, which we would of course handle, and then completing a 10-page plaintiff fact sheet, which is just a very abbreviated form to get information about the school. Most likely there would not be depositions, extensive document production. Your administrators and your superintendent would not be sitting in multi-day depositions like you may think about with your historical litigation that is involved in. So we know that being plaintiffs in lawsuits is not something school districts do on a regular basis. We feel like this is unique, but we really believe that there's a problem that you'll cause, and the question is who should pay for that problem? Should it be the taxpayers, or should it be you? And that's really the purpose of this case, is to really try to hold it. So happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Any questions from the board members?
I have one, thank you. I did some reading on the litigation, and it seems that when it started out with just one or two districts, there was an amount listed as to what they thought the recovery might be. But if we do grow, and you answered the other question, if we do grow to 400 or 500 districts, is that amount still stable? Are we suing for even more? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. So the litigation within, in our view, the more cases, the more schools that get involved, the higher the value of the litigation would be. So as we speak right now, there's not a set fund or a set pool of money set aside. So that would not be determined until it's how many cases are involved. We're still very early in the case. The first case will go to trial next year in San Francisco, and our firm will be involved in trying all of those cases. So it's actually really early in the process, so it's a good time to get involved. But for better or worse, you won't be kind of up front and center. And I think that's a big thing for schools. You don't want to be tied up in litigation, and this is something your business of doing, being plaintiff in lawsuits. We think you can do this for really minimal inconvenience for the school district.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Next up, we have Dr. Sharkins talking about developing Mathematical Thinking Institute contract.
Good evening, Dr. Moore, President Wheel, and distinguished board members. I'm actually on the agenda twice, so I'm going to talk about those contracts, if that's okay with you. This summer, MPS has an opportunity to partner with providers that will take teacher preparation and student engagement, education, and experiences to unprecedented levels. Two of the vendors are university instructors in developing Mathematical Thinking Institute. The proposals before you include curricular development based upon state and district data-determined critical standards and are supported with teacher professional development and side-by-side coaching. Students will also experience aligned age and developmentally appropriate projects and real-world applications. University instructors will provide total support to the 8 MPS full support schools. Developing Mathematical Thinking Institute, the MTI, will be part of the support system for the remaining summer school sites. If you have questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
questions? Okay. Dr. Sharples, I think you're talking, did you cover the utilizing federal funds to improve student achievement yet?
No, that's not my.
That's not yours.
No, ma'am.
Okay.
No, I had the two contracts, university instructors and DMPI.
Thank you. You're welcome. Okay. So, Dr. James.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, board members, Superintendent Moore. Testing, testing. Testing. Good. Testing, testing, testing. We're good. Brain center. Well, good evening, everyone. Board members, Superintendent Moore. I greet you on behalf of Gloria Odetola. She's our Federal Programs Director, and my name is Eric James. She's not able to join us this evening. My name is Eric James. I'm a Compliance Manager in Federal Programs Department, and I just want to speak with you for a couple of minutes as it relates to testing. Is that better? Okay. I just want to speak to you for a couple of minutes as it relates to utilizing our federal funds, but I wanted to give you a good backdrop as far as outlining the process that we go through when it comes to administering, when it comes to implementing, actually planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating those funds. So I just want to take you on like a little brief grand tour. And it first starts, I think you guys have the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, you can track me using your PowerPoint presentation. And so one of your pages, I think it's page 3, it says, what exactly does MPS federal programs do? And one of the things that we do, we provide oversight for our funds, but very specifically, I want to take you to a journey as far as before schools get their money, the hard work and the collaborative work that's done in order to make sure that they're leveraging their funds properly in order to meet the needs of the students. And so one of the first things that you see is that we lead the development of the district and school needs assessment. And so schools are with their principals and their leadership teams. They work very closely in looking at all the multiple pieces of data in order their school data, every piece of data as it relates to their schools and their specific demographics and the needs of their students. And this is an ongoing effort. So, but at the end of the year, they review a large piece of that comprehensive piece of data, and they look to see what were some of the highlighting needs that they experienced throughout the year. And as they look at those comprehensive needs assessments, that helps them to develop their plans. We call them their continuous improvement plan. So that's in Cognia now. Cognia, we use the Cognia platform as it relates to the school's continuous improvement plan, and it has worked well for us. We're in our second year of using that platform, and the platform is designed to have all the 4 phases as far as when it comes to planning, implementing, monitoring, and evaluation embedded within the program itself. And so one of the things that we do is that as we lead them in conducting their needs assessment, then we help them to translate that into their plans. Now, the new platform has it to where their plans are 3 to 5 year plans, which is exciting, but every year is reviewed and throughout the year. So based on the plans that they create, identifying those report card indicators and how it relates to their specific school environment. They have to map out goals, and they have to go very deep in the actual improvement plan and put action steps and critical initiative activities that speak directly to how they're going to move each report card indicator. Now, after they complete their plans, then we look at the other side to help them to complete their budgets, because their budget has to mirror the needs of their plan. And so as we work collaboratively with them and helping them to complete their budget, then we're able to jumpstart the year, so to speak, and we're able to get started, and they actually they actually implement their budgets. It's a cyclical process. What happens throughout the year with them is that as we monitor the use of their funds, as we look at personnel that they've hired, materials that they've hired, programs that they've purchased, we're able to look and see and help them to navigate what's the best use that they're getting for what they ordered, and making sure that they're getting the things that they need based on their needs assessment. A lot of what we do also is making sure that with their purchases, to make sure that everything that they purchase or acquire as a service, it's done within the regulations and rules as it relates to ESSER, Every Student Succeeds Act. Okay, I go with this slide. And so with the slide that you see now, well, actually, if you can go back for me, go back one more. This is fine. We'll stop right here. And so, again, Title I is supplemental. It's supplemental to the state and local funding that they receive. And so with the Title I funding, one of the ways that's calculated as far as how schools would determine what the money that they receive is based on their poverty rate as well as their student enrollment. And now, as we look at our PowerPoint here, we have 40 Title I schools in our district. We have 15 CSI schools, what we call comprehensive improvement and instruction schools. And then we have 2 of our SIG schools. That's a special grant where we have 2, which is Bellingraph and McKee. There are 2 schools with the SIG grant. And one of the things that we wanted to capture with our PowerPoint with the Title I Part A, the goal is to make sure that all of our students that's entitled at those schools are receiving equitable services. And it's to basically make sure that they're being provided every opportunity in order to meet those report card goals that's outlined in there, that's outlined by the state, and that's also outlined in their continuous improvement plans. One of the things that we have before you is that, well, how was some of those money spent? What were some of the commonalities and how some of those funds were directed? One of the biggest things that we noticed that personnel, a lot of the schools went heavy with personnel as it relates to wanting to make sure that they had the human knowledge and the human resources to help move those scores and help develop those students. Just for an example, as schools look at their plans and as they reflect on those plans, a school may notice that, you know what, we have a large EL population. And to address our EL population during our intervention period, we're needing to hire more instructional aides to reach those grades 3 through 5, or however they see those needs. And so that's the thing that from the plan, they have to be able to trace it in their budget. If it doesn't match with the needs of their plan, then it's not going to equate to being placed on their budget. But schools have done a great job in assessing the human needs of their school and going out to be able to acquire those different people that work in those capacities to meet those needs. You hear a lot as far as it relates to COVID and the pandemic. One of the huge necessities throughout our schools was the PPE supplies. And so that was a huge area that translated into the school's budgets, and as well as some of the other things that we listed in our PowerPoint bullets as well. One of the other programs that's part of Title I Part A is our neglected and delinquent fund source. And this source is designed to target or support the students that are either to help them prevent them from dropping out. The students could have already dropped out, or they're educated youth. And so our Title I funds are always designed to make sure that we're reaching our students wherever they are in the sphere of life and giving them the opportunity to improve. And some of the things that we notice also with our title funding, and we have 6 particular sites that serves our neglected and delinquent students. Among those are Safety Net, Sequel, Brentwood Children's Home, Spandau Montgomery, and Montgomery County Youth Facility, and the Montgomery County Detention Center. And we work closely with those sites, following that same process of going over their needs to help them determine what their budget priorities would be, and then monitoring them throughout the year with the personnel or the materials that they purchase. And then that last piece, evaluating to see how did those programs fare and how did those programs impact their students. Another piece that we have is the McKinney-Vento, or the Homeless Act. And we have a great educational specialist that's responsible for that oversees our homeless. And it's just like it says, for the families and the students that fall under that condition. These funds are designed to make sure that they remove any barriers as it relates to their enrollment, attending, and their succeeding in those schools. And those funds are allocated to best meet their practical needs as it relates to personal hygiene kits, backpacks, uniforms, and this is not an exhaustive list as far as what some of those funds were used for. Next, I'd like to talk to you about the Title IV Part A, which is our student support and academic enrichment fund source. This particular Title IV Part A is at a district level fund source, and this is where we're able to, in our collaboration at the district level with the principals, we're able to look at different trends and needs overall for the district, because the purpose of this particular fund source is enrichment. It seeks to how can we enrich the lives of students. And one of the great things in the areas of well-rounded education, safety, as well as technology. Those are the 3 categories that we must align our monies with. And some of the things that we're able to do, we saw that need-wise and trend-wise that would give our students, put them at a place of advantage, was some of our professional learning with the STEM and robotics activities. Also, we saw the need for mental health as far as with the social-emotional piece of some of our students, and we have some great partners that work directly with those schools that are in the most need to service those students. And also with our students that are taking AP in class. So we help provide training to the teachers, as well as providing those resources for those AP classes as well. And another thing that I'd love to mention right here is that the inclusion of getting students, providing them the opportunity to become more, develop an interest for music. And so we really focused on our high schools and our middle schools for this year, and providing them with different materials and instruments to further and enhance their musical programs, with the expectation that we'll be able to bring on for the upcoming year more of like the elementary schools. So we started off in phases. And then next, I'd like to speak to you about Title IV Part B, and this is the 21st Century Title Fund. 21st Century, it specializes in providing students opportunities after school hours, and again, along the lines of opportunities that they would not necessarily normally have in terms of enrichment. And so some of the activities, again, in some of those programs include STEM activities, and also contracted services that we had to expose kids to coding and computer coding, and some virtual field trips as well. And the 2 schools that we have for our 21st Century this year, we're servicing Goodwin Middle as well as Capitol Heights. I think I've taken enough of your time for this evening. If you have any questions, I'd also like to, if you have any specific questions for Ms. Ototola as it relates to the presentation, I'd like to capture some of those and make sure that we're able to get some accurate answers for you, and provide them to Superintendent Moore, where she can provide them to you guys. But I thank you, and that concludes my presentation.
Are there any questions? Any questions for Dr. James? Thank you. Dr. Williamson? social emotional learning supports.
Good evening. Can you hear me okay? So if you would first take a look at your purple handout, I wanted to take just a few minutes to talk about some of the social emotional supports that will be embedded in our summer Learning Progression Academy. So we will sponsor social emotional sessions in all of the sites that will be open for the summer session. Those will be face-to-face sessions for our students. Our behavior interventionists, our behavior coaches, and our guidance counselors will be the ones that provide these sessions for our babies. We are developing that curriculum so that it is very responsive to the needs of our children based on what we know has been happening around the pandemic. We know that during the pandemic, our babies have been separated from us. They've experienced stresses that they've not experienced before. They've experienced loss. And so we are creating sessions that will be very detail-oriented towards supporting them through that and preparing for the transition back into the school district as we come back face-to-face for the upcoming school year. One of the things that as you go through that summary, you'll see that some of the topics that will be included during that session will be things like how do you communicate effectively, how do you handle grief, how do you manage your stress, managing our time, some things that are very relevant for children as we are still navigating these waters throughout the pandemic. Each session will be developed as an intro and a deeper dive. So our students will be rotated in the schedule in their buildings so that they are participating in 2 sessions each week with our counselors. If you remember during the Learning Progression Academy, there is also that 1 to 3 enrichment time. So we are also making our counselors available based on what evolves during the 8 to 1 period where everyone attends. If children need one-on-one counseling, small group counseling, then our counselors will be available to meet those very individualized needs as well. Do you have any questions about the social emotional learning piece?
I only had one. Are there any other outside agencies or nonprofit organizations that will be coming in to assist, or will it will?
So yes, ma'am, we already partner with Family Guidance Center, and we've partnered with Family Sunshine. We work with them already to support some of the needs. They are one of our significant partners, especially when it comes to grief management. We have COSA, who is a new partner of ours who has not been able to get into the schools because of the pandemic, so we're actually working together, and they also have a curriculum that we're going to use in our middle schools. Any other questions? Just briefly, and I won't go through it, but you have it for your information. There were some questions that were raised the last board meeting about what happens whenever we have a crisis on any of our campuses. So I put a summary together for you that describes the crisis team process, who's on the crisis team, what happens when we have a crisis within our district from the time we are preparing for that crisis to the time we land on the ground at that school. It is always at the school site. We are there the day that the crisis happens, and we return subsequent days as needed depending on what's going on. Our counselors work with the students as well as the adults in the building based on around those issues to give them the emotional support that's needed in dealing with that crisis. We also have developed grief materials as well as additional support materials that are now available virtually because we needed to be, not deal with so much paper during the pandemic. So it has allowed us to take our supports to the next level. So even when we leave that campus, if it is determined that someone needs additional supports, there is a referral link that is left with the principal that can be placed in Schoology for kids or placed or sent through email for the faculty so that they can continue to have access to us as needed. And then again, we have partners that support us with that. So if there is more long-term counseling needed, we make those necessary referrals. Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very good report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell, 2122 Math Pathways.
Great evening, everyone. Board Chair Will, Assistant Chair Mitchell, board members, Dr. Moore. We had a presentation coming down. I just want to speak to, as we transition with the math courses 2021-2022. It's imperative that as we walk from the cradle to the cusp of college, everything that we do is determined by future desires. That's the partnership between our parents, our students, and our educators. So from K all the way through 12, we have a pathway. And as we transition here, every student has the ability to take grade level, advanced, or accelerated courses each year. For instance, if a student is accelerated in the middle school, they would take grade 7 accelerated and grade 8 accelerated math. It will satisfy the Algebra 1 credit. Very important. If they do that, it will give them the Algebra 1 credit. Unlike before, they do not take Algebra 1 anymore. So as they transition to high school, they will move immediately into geometry. But if a student were to take only grade 7 on grade level and grade 8 on grade level, when they reach high school, they will also go to geometry, but immediately thereafter, they'll be required to take the Algebra 1. Now, very important, geometry will be the course for both accelerated students and on grade level students. But the students who are considered accelerated will go from geometry to Algebra 2. But the students who are considered on grade level will go from geometry back to Algebra 1. Most important point in this particular situation is that no longer in middle schools will they earn a Carnegie unit for high school. Next slide, please. So, for example, in the middle school, after grade 6, is 3 questions that's paramount as we determine, are you an accelerated student or are you on grade level or advanced? Question number 1, do students find math particularly interesting? You know, the ones that love math? Yes. 2, do students struggle with mathematical discourse and problem solving? And 3, are students interested in a career that involves a lot of mathematics? If the answer is yes, their pathway is through accelerated. If the answer is no, their pathway is through on grade level. The goal is to make sure that every student is getting prepared for his or her future. It is not saying that they're both not getting ready for a high quality future. One is just going through an accelerated pathway and the others are going through an on grade level pathway. Next slide, please. So, if a student is planning to enter into a major that involves a lot of mathematics, high levels of mathematics, then those students should have a pathway in pre-calculus and other advanced level courses that will prepare them for STEM careers, science, math, engineering, technology careers. If a student is not one that's preparing themselves for a career totally embedded in mathematics, they should take application type courses which prepare them for life immediately into the world of work. Both ways is designed to give them a high quality learning and living environment. Important note, the new math pathway is designed to ensure that every student takes a math class during his or her senior year. It's designed to make sure that every student takes a math class every year in high school, the 9th, 10th, and 11th and 12th grade year. Next slide, please. So with that being said, as I said, from the cradle to career, it is a pathway designed to ensure that if I am technical in my approach, I would take courses designed around technical math, finite math, math for elementary education, and going into careers that are non-mathematical. Even if you're a lawyer and your focus is not on mathematics, you would take courses there. At the same time, the opportunity exists for those students as well. If you are embedded in a career around mathematics, then your pathway will be around calculus, business calculus, intro statistics. So you will have a pathway that's saying that you're going into fields around engineering, around physics, around pre-med. Are there any questions?
I actually have a question, Madam Chair. One of my questions was about, in my district, there are some specialty schools.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how or if that will change the way that they offer their core classes, especially in math. Will there be, take for example, LAMP and BruTech, will there be any modifications needed for their for the math department or what have you? I know that some of them, they're already advanced, so how does this change the dynamics for them?
It will not, because for the most part, every student of them that was targeted to go to LAMP, they always had a math course every year. So they had the accelerated pathway. So this is aligning to exactly what they've been doing the entire time. So they had, in the past, algebra and geometry, and they went to Algebra 2 in the 9th grade. Now they would go through just accelerated 7 and 8 mathematics, then through geometry, and they will begin as well with Algebra 2. So they will still begin with Algebra 2 in the 9th grade. It would just be a different pathway that takes them there.
So if they are coming from, and I'm just using this one because they're in my district, if accelerated math 8 is offered, it looks like all children would take geometry with data analysis or possibly jump to Algebra 2. Am I reading that correctly?
You are, and here's the thing, if you are accelerated grade ahead, then you will move the chart that was on page 3. In the 6th grade, you would take grade 7 accelerated. In the 7th grade, you would take grade 8 accelerated. Grade 7 accelerated and grade 8 accelerated would satisfy the Algebra 1 credit. And then in the 8th grade, they would take geometry. Okay. And so when they get to high school, they'll begin with Algebra 2 with statistics.
Okay, and for the students in traditional schools, especially the emerging, now soon to be 9th graders, having to now go into geometry, and I understand how you said that one, I guess, well, how would that impact them? And first of all, I'm so used to algebra being offered before geometry.
Yes, exactly.
So how is that going to impact those students who may not have be prepared for geometry? What supports are going to be in place to make sure those children don't fall through the gap?
I love that Dr. James went before me because he had a great support system in place with federal programs. But here's the difference between the two classes, grade 7, 8 accelerated and grade 7, 8 on grade level. Grade 7 accelerated, there's 44 standards. Grade 8 accelerated, there's like 44 standards. So grade 7 and grade 8 would have 88 content standards that they would satisfy. Algebra 1 is embedded in there. For a student who's not accelerated or taking accelerated classes, they would take grade 7 math, which would be somewhere around 22 standards. Grade 8 math would be 24 standards. And then the Algebra 1 will be the other 30 standards that they need. So they would get the grade 7 math, the grade 8 math, and the Algebra 1 that will constitute the same amount of standards that's not considered in the accelerated pathway. As it relates to geometry with data analysis, they made the class be centered around the fact that if you are a student who took grade 7 math and grade 8 math, you are prepared for this type of geometry because it's not at the same level as the past geometry was. So the first semester in geometry with data analysis is deeply embedded around algebraic supported concepts.
We're gonna need a retreat for this one. That's a lot of information. And because achievement and student achievement
Yes.
is for those students in traditional schools, and even our magnet schools I'm just concerned that there are going to be children that fall through the gap. It's not our fault, it's not MPS fault. This was done, put together by the state legislators, passed down to the State Department, who passed it down to us.
Yes.
So we're just kind of having to figure this out based off of what they think our children need, and I'll digress there. But thank you.
And I agree there as well, if I can. Here's the difference. For instance, if you're in grade 7 accelerated, you have 44 standards to learn. So you have to learn more than one per week. If you're in grade 7 mathematics, you only have 22 to learn. So you have the ability to maybe teach a week and a half, or even 2 weeks sometimes, getting them ready for a standard that they would have been accelerated in a quicker path if they was on an accelerated pathway. Keeping in mind that double dosing and triple dosing could exist in the grade 7 math, when in accelerated math, you're moving at a quicker pace and the conceptual understanding is expected. Now, I know this is going to be a tough pathway, regardless of where it is, and we began a year in advance, so we transitioned this year a year in advance with that conversation.
So will there be a pacing guide then, or will the teachers move at the pace of the students versus the pace of a pacing guide?
We will have, and throughout the entire system, we have developed a pacing guide with unit plans to identify concepts to be taught every week.
So it'll be more of a unit plan.
Exactly.
And not
Yes.
so much a pacing guide.
Exactly. And for the most part, within the first quarter, flexibility will exist. So we would not expect for teachers to be at Lee versus Lanier on exactly the same page. But by the end of the first 9 weeks, they should have completed the first 9 week standards to be learned.
I guess my biggest concern is that there's just been an interruption in the school year. So I know that the kids are going to come back needing a lot of support. So that's why I brought up the pacing guide. I didn't want it to be like, you know, a ball and, well, a whip, and you're just kind of telling teachers, hey, you got to get this done by this time, but let it be more student-centered and the pace be focused around how the students are moving. So that was just my concern, so it's not rushed through.
Exactly.
And kids get frustrated, so yeah.
And we know that even this summer, every student who can attend is paramount that they're present, because this is a chance to make sure that we can spiral, reconsider the standard that they may have struggled with, especially since they were virtual for the most part.
But pace or not, the 3 questions are almost a matter of choice. If you want to excel, you excel. If you don't, and then like you said, you're going to be flexible.
But
I'm
here
not
at the same
understanding-
time, yes, ma'am.
I'm not understanding all the major concerns there, because it just seems like, you know, we have people complaining that they didn't make it into the magnet schools. Okay, well, now you have a chance to choose yourself whether you want to go through the accelerated pathway or, you know, stay on grade level. Am I right?
Yes, and we also want that to be supported by the teachers and the administration as well. So we want to make sure that we're guiding them through their choices as well.
Yeah, and thank you, Lisa. That was never my argument. That I just wanted to make sure that the students had just the supports, whether you choose Accelerate or not. It was still just an interrupted year. So,
and here's an example. For instance, if a student is considered a struggling learner in mathematics, they would take algebra and geometry, and then they could take a finite math or a computer science-based support class more geared towards their career, that's not taking them into a field of mathematics, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So it's going to be very important that the counselors, the teachers have a conversation with our students and help guide them through the pathways.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you all.
Ms. Jade Jones, Communications Summer Plan for the Summer Program and General.
Good evening. Can everyone hear me okay? Perfect. Good evening, President Will, Dr. Moore, and board members. As we all know, this past academic year presented us with many challenges and heartaches. In our personal and professional lives, we've all experienced an extreme shift away from our normal daily activities. When we factor in students and learning, the differences are even clearer. In fact, we've kicked off our school year virtually, which was a major departure from our normal way of doing things. In response to these changes, MPS has created a summer learning program to combat unfinished learning and prepare our students for the upcoming year. Tonight, and even at previous board meetings, you've heard all about Launch Into Learning. Starting this week, you will see and hear more about our program in the wider community. We're going to kick things off with an information press conference. We'll share registration information, expectations of our students, and overall goals of the program. To provide you a little sneak peek, this is an opportunity for all of our MPS students yet again. We'll have enrichment activities, exciting field trip opportunities, dual enrollment courses, tours of impact for students to learn more about CTE, and for students who need to focus on credit recovery and promotion status. Again, there will be tons for all of our students, and we're really encouraging participation. So I ask you, this all sounds great, right? Again, beneficial and valuable for our students. I mentioned earlier, we plan to kick off this week. Next up, we'll work with our media partners to strategically book interviews, encouraging our parents to sign their students up. The focus will be learning, summer learning, but we'll also stress the pressing need of having our students to continue to log in this grading period. In addition to media interviews, we're going to meet the parents where they are. We've asked our principals to help us champion this program as we create parent info sessions. Parents will be able to ask their questions and get a better understanding of what this summer will look like for their students. We're going to safely go into our communities and canvass Montgomery with this information. Board members, this is a great way for you to connect with your districts. And speaking of our community, our partnerships with elected officials and other community stakeholders will play a critical role in raising awareness of this amazing opportunity for our students. Next slide. So, in general, it usually takes about 5 to 7 impressions for a consumer to remember a brand, which is why we're taking these steps to raise awareness of this program. Again, to truly prepare our students for the upcoming year, we need them to participate. So throughout Montgomery, families will see Launch Into Learning billboards. In addition, we have our landing page, mpslaunch.com. Again, that is mpslaunch.com, not to be confused with www.mpslaunch.com. So in essence, you don't need the triple W's. And again, that is a microsite with information about Launch Into Learning. We have a direct mail strategy where we will mail postcards to every household we have on file. And we're not going to stop there. After that phase in our direct mail strategy, we're going to blanket certain zip codes where we can use a little reinforcement for those students. We've created flyers to place at our local businesses, posters, and banners to be placed at our host sites. And of course, my favorite, social media ads that will specifically target parents and other like audiences that have an interest in our school system. So, what do these visuals look like? The first visual is our billboard that will be placed strategically across the city. Right now, we're scheduled to have at least 5 billboards, including digital billboards, which will begin to appear on April 26. Again, these boards will be strategically placed across the city based on availability, of course. Next, we have an example of our social media ads and our banners. MPS families and supporters, again, will start to see these social ads as early as next week. So I know we've discussed a lot of what we're doing at the district level, but I want to make sure everyone understands we're going to work with our schools and district staff members to help spread the word. We're going to constantly update our talking points to share with the entire organization in a timely manner. We're going to tap into our principals to host interviews, have our teachers join in on those conversations, and again, reiterating our parent info sessions. It's critical that our parents see our school building personnel because they have the most intimate relationships with our students and parents. At this time, I'll pause here for a few questions or maybe feedback regarding Launch Into Learning and the marketing elements.
Madam President, I just have one question. Will this, our lunch be done in most of the languages that make up the majority?
Yes, and in our print, that's a that's a good question. Our print flyers and posters and things like that, that will be available in Spanish. There is a feature on our microsite to be able to translate into most major languages. Thank you, that's a great question.
Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Not sure I really need a microphone, but I just have a comment. Thank you so much. This is such a great communications project and program and moving forward. And, you know, I know it's been a rough year with COVID and everything, but I think some really good things have come out of this. And I can tell you've been really working hard on this, and it looks great, and I can't wait to be part of it. So call me anytime.
Yeah, you all will start to receive those requests this week, so thank you for your support.
I love the two kids, the Launch Into Learning. It's a great look, fresh.
I have to tap into my colleagues. That was actually Dr. Moore and Dr. Sharkins, if she's still here. So I thank them for their support in this. We really had a great time planning this out, and we did share this with a small group of principals and other school personnel to get their buy-in, and took that feedback, and this is the result of it. So we're really excited.
Okay.
All right. Well, Madam President, moving right along, just to highlight our general comm plan. Again, looking back over this previous academic year, we faced, again, many challenges as an organization. COVID played an enormous part, but we do have a few barriers we can remove. For example, MPS needs a true market research analysis performed. Having this report completed will allow us to identify our target and sub-audiences and help us understand the needs of those audiences with proper messaging and just so much more. Our strategic goal listed in our strategic plan reads as follows: communicate more effectively by using multiple tools to communicate with every internal and external stakeholder. Basically, we need to be more transparent, accurate, and timely with our messages, and that's all of our messaging. So what are our next steps? I so proudly worked with Scott Johnson this year. I completed my first year on April 1, and we've done a lot, but Scott and I have a long way to go. We're gonna get started on that market research. We'll send surveys and pull together small focused study groups to provide us the much needed data to flesh out our comm plan. Next, we'll engage with a communication consultant to ensure we're fine tuning those messages. After receiving those best practices from our consultant, we'll start to implement them into that working comm plan you have a snapshot of. And that way we'll update, and we'll continue to update that framework until it's complete. We do have a goal to bring the final comm plan for the upcoming year, July 1, and we'll provide Dr. Moore continuous updates as we build that out so that you're aware of what we're doing. Again, we're looking forward to moving forward together. Madam President.
Any questions about the communications plan?
No question, but I would like to say that this document that you provided for us on internal and external plans for communication, it shows that you've been listening, and we appreciate the fact that you are listening and working to help us move forward internally as well as with our community. I'd like to thank you for the presentation.
I appreciate it. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Jade. Next up, we have Mr. Anderson on our facilities update. He's been busy, I think.
Good evening, President Wheel, Dr. Moore, and members of the board. I'd like to go over our spreadsheet that I provided with several of our projects going on, and then we'll discuss the contract for the HVAC at Brubaker Middle. Capitol Heights, the Capitol Heights roof is probably a little more than 35% done at this point. We've had some good weather, relatively speaking, and they've been moving rather quickly on that. The Union Street elevator project is pushing towards the end of that. We're waiting on the delivery of the carriage itself from ThyssenKrupp. And the BTW construction contract, they are well underway, was out there yesterday, putting in some of the underground utilities in, PVC and such, and they're about to begin the retainage. That's the big pipes that you see, the underground retainage that will be on the south end of that property from your pictures. And then the security vestibules, each site is under construction. We're having to work around testing that's going on in the buildings, and the principals are working with us on that. We try to get as much of the rough demo done prior to testing and prior to the people coming back in the building. We're just basically waiting on the metal frame doors and materials to come in so that we can begin the installation on those, and looking forward to those being in 11 of our elementary schools, and we will look to extend those as we have more funding coming available to provide a secure vestibule for each of our elementary schools. The CMP summer feeding program, I think you've seen that with a launch into learning, is going to be much expanded from what it typically is in the summer. And Ms. Beard is gearing up for that, working with curriculum and making sure that we are ready to provide meals. We not only provide our meals for MPS, but we also provide meals for the YMCA. We help the city out and different various entities as well. It produces a little bit of revenue for us, and we also get to expand it and get more kids fed through the summer. The transportation, Mr. Thornton is also working with curriculum to make sure that we can provide the transportation for students for the summer learning. We know that is an element that can slow things down for some of our students. It can be a roadblock, so we want to make sure that we provide that for our students to get them caught up and start back to learning in the environment that Mr. Mitchell is setting forth. And then we completed our first paving project over here at Baldwin Middle School with the city. They did that for us just a week or so ago. We'll be looking to expand that very, very soon to Capitol Heights and Vaughn Road. We're working with them on Capitol Heights because they had intended to pave their parking lot in front of the community center. So we went in with them on that to get that paved as well, but it should not slow us down from any kind of summer program at that location. And then we'll be working on several other sites through the summer with them, and you can see the goal there is to have all of our parking lots paved within a 5-year period. That's pretty lofty, but we'll push and we'll do the best we can, working with our partners with the city, and just thank them for their assistance with those things as well. If you don't have any questions on any of the projects, I can pivot to the Brubaker Middle HVAC. Okay. Excuse me. Okay. The Brubaker Middle HVAC is what you see before you is the contract for the low bid service provider in installing that this summer. That's long overdue, like many of our sites, and we're going to be pushing to expand that as quickly as we can. But that is a full summer project that will extend into some of the beginning of next year. We anticipate that. Hopefully we can push it further and quicker, as quick as we can, but we're trying to get that boots on the ground as quick as we can with approval tonight. The Comfort Systems is ready to begin as quickly as possible on that. Any questions on the Brubaker Middle?
Oh, goodness. I do have one, Madam President. I was looking at the contract and was wondering, what is the contract sum? Is it?
It should be listed towards on that front page. It's $4.1 million for the service contract on there. That is the installation of it.
On the one in Assembly? Or is there a hard copy? Oh, it's in the hard, okay, it's
I'm
in the
sorry.
hard copy.
But yes, ma'am, the low bid was
Yes, yeah. Okay, it was-
$4.1 million, which excludes the equipment in that. In order to get the project moving as quickly as possible, we purchased the equipment off of another purchasing cooperative, another purchasing contract, to get that rolling prior to the service contract coming before you tonight for installation.
Are there other questions? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Watts, financial statement.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the board, Madam Superintendent. You should have before you the financial statement for February of 2021. As you note, February represents the 5th month of the fiscal year. Contained in the financial statement would be the explanation of financial data, which is basically the CSFO's discussions of the district's financial standings. The snapshot analysis is a brief snapshot of our district's financial position. Monthly budget percentages. Of course, this is the 5th month of the fiscal year, February, which is 41.67% of the year, which is 5 divided by 12. Your monthly and annual comparative statement of revenues and expenses. There's a list of all month-to-date revenues and expenditures, and of course it compares those revenues and expenditures to the prior year. Also, there's a statement of cash flow, which are all of our cash inflows and payments. Also, our pie chart of cash inflow, outflows. And of course, that's just a pie chart or graph that shows the percentage of those particular inflows and outflows. Combined financial statement. This is the balance sheet, states the district's financial position, and basically the revenues and expenditure statement, which is in private business more of an income statement, and then there's of course a definition of accounting terms. Madam President, I would just like to say that we were earlier projecting to end fiscal year 2021 with about a $31.2 million fund balance. Of course, we know that the state requires us to have about $18.4 million. Well, we'd like to kind of up those projections now, and I believe that based on our financial operations, that we'll end fiscal year 2021 with at least 2 times the state requirement, which is over $36 million. So we feel really, really good about the financial operations of the school district, and of course the superintendent and board's frugalness to make sure that all of our dollars are being expended according to its needs. Again, we also note that that as of February, which is about 41.67% of the year, that we've expended actual about 39.2%. So we are definitely expending below what the stated monthly average would be. So we're very, very proud about that. We are still at the same time ensuring that we're taking care of students' needs, taking care of operational needs, but we're just being very, very careful with taxpayers' dollars. Madam President.
It is very good.
Sure. Well, it just really depends on the district, and the only reason that our local right now is at 35% is because we've collected the majority of our local ad valorem taxes. By the time the year ends, our local revenues will be about 25%. So our local revenues will be about 25%. State revenues will be about 60 to 65%. That is very abnormal. When you have 25% of local revenues, it pretty much shows that you're not funded locally the way you should be. And that's why I think it was so important that the board elected to have this ad valorem tax increase. When you look at other school districts that have similar demographics as Montgomery, such as the Birmingham and Huntsville and so forth, most of their local revenues total about 40-something% compared to our 25%. So we're very, very happy that we did pass this ad valorem tax that will help in that manner.
Right, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And I studied this pretty closely. This is a very, very good financial.
Yes, ma'am.
You've put us in a very good financial position. Thank you.
Thank you. And hooray to the board also for making some very, very tough decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Watts. Dr. Moore, Minority Participation Program Policy.
Thank you. So over perhaps several board meetings and in discussion with our board members and others, there was a desire to have a minority participation program policy. And so we worked, Mr. Watts, Mr. Rudolph, Spud, and I, Spud is our attorney, worked on putting a policy together which would enhance our ability to make it really plain and obvious to vendors and others that we do support the minority participation piece. I will add that, you know, in the past we have definitely tried to make it at the forefront of things that we need to do locally, but we never did have a statement in any of our policies, which also enhances that idea. And so this is the minority participation program policy that has been reviewed by legal. If you look at the second paragraph, you will see that it talks about a goal of the board that 30% of the total dollar amount available each fiscal year to the board for contracts covered by this policy shall be spent with the minority or disadvantaged businesses. And so the 30% is put in there as a goal. Sometimes you will be able to go beyond that goal, and sometimes you might not quite reach that goal depending on the circumstances. But it is a statement of a projection of which we would like for our vendors to, as much as possible, try to meet. And we would make sure that our vendors know that this policy does exist once it is approved, and that it is something that we, as a board, support.
I have a question. The way that I read this policy is a very vague policy. The only thing that is specified here is the 30%, the goal of 30%. So just to be perfectly clear, are we saying the goal is to utilize the 30% of the dollars with subcontractors or service providers, or are we saying our major contractors will have some form of stipulation in their contracts with MPS for them to use a certain percentage of subcontractors that are of minority? Because that's not clear when I read this policy.
Well, I think it goes both to what you ask, and it also goes to in a case where a minority contractor might be the person or the vendor that receives 100% of whatever it is, the business that we're trying to get into. But if there are other vendors, whether they are minority vendors who get a contract, and if they have to deal with some subcontractors, then that goal would be that 30% of the money that's available during that year would be covered by this policy.
So I don't think there's an exact way that you can look at this when you're looking at, you know, you could have women vendors, you could have African-American vendors, you could have Latino vendors, you could have Caucasian vendors. And also, based on the ability in this case of some subcontractors to be bonded at an amount that would allow them to participate as a subcontractor. So there are a number of variables involved in this kind of a contract or a policy. So that, but the goal is that at least 30%, if at all possible, will be allocated toward using minority participation in the process.
Okay, but there's no assurance here, and like I said, there needs to be some more specific terms. I would feel more comfortable with more specific terms, such as wordings to ensure that there are requirements that are given to our contractors that's specific to the use of minority service providers or subcontractors, and also who is overseeing this process, and you know, is there any plan? Because last month when we talked, there was a plan or some discussion on assisting minority businesses with development and growth to be competitive in this particular aspect. So I don't see any of that as a part of this policy, which I guess I was expecting to see something of that relevance in this policy.
So I think that when you write a policy, you don't get into all those details, but you could develop some procedures to go with the policy that would go along with what you're suggesting.
Well, you know, I did a little research and looked at some other policies throughout the state as it relates to school boards, and other major cities did not see a problem with putting that type of language in their policies. And I would really appreciate us tabling this until we can get some more definition in this policy, or if there is a need to have procedures to back this policy up, to give us time to be thoughtful and deliberate in our actions, because this is very important. We keep talking about the ad valorem tax. The citizens of Montgomery came behind the school board when that was requested, and I think that businesses came behind the school board as well, including minority businesses, and I think the consideration should be given here as we roll out a policy.
If you want to table it, we can do that. I'm going to suggest that you send your comments in writing to me and to Mr. Watts so that we can review those as we look at drafting something that's more procedural for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions on the policy? Okay. Next up, we have Mr. Marvin Rudolph to discuss the program management consultant presentation by Vokert, Inc.
Good evening. Madam President, Vice Chair, and Dr. Moore, and fellow board members. It's my honor to have the opportunity to speak to you this evening regarding the recent request for a program management consultant. I believe each of you should have a packet that contains some relevant content. The Board of Education administered an RFQ for program management and we published this RFQ on February the 25th, 2021. There was a bid amendment or an RFQ amendment that extended the deadline through March the 23rd, 2021. The initial list of interested entities or parties was about 8 individuals or 8 firms. Of those 8, we were able to make direct contact via email solicitation. And from that process, it resulted in the Montgomery County Board of Education receiving 3 responses. But before I get into the responses, I wanted to address perhaps some concern relative to transparency. You should see an email thread from myself to the Office of Communications, specifically requesting that the RFQ be published on Montgomery Public Schools homepage, along with any ancillary documentation. In fact, the RFQ and the RFQ amendment, as we speak, remains published on MPS's homepage. This is important. Whenever we administer an invitation for bid, a request for proposal, a request for qualification, etc., pursuant to regulation, it's important that we maintain fidelity during the process or the administration of such solicitations. And I represent before the board this evening that I can represent that fidelity to the process was strictly adhered to. So let's talk about the responses. As a result of the RFQ advertisement or solicitation, the Montgomery County Board of Education received 3 responses, and they are annotated on your list, that being Volkert, TCU, and HPM. So the next phase was to go into the evaluation of the responses. And the evaluation committee was comprised of, along with myself, Superintendent Dr. Moore, Arthur Watts, CSFO, and Mr. Chad Anderson, our Executive Director for Operations. We gave notice to the 3 respondents last Thursday, and we conducted those interviews via Zoom meeting on last Friday. At the conclusion of the interview process, the evaluation committee went into immediate collaboration as a committee. We compared notes based on the RFQ, prescribed criteria, and the interviews. Once we completed the committee process, the collaboration piece, the committee adjourned. We adjourned for a period of time, and with my specific instructions to score the responses or the respondents' proposals independent of the committee members. And that's critically important for the board and the public to understand. Yes, we collaborated as we should have as a collaborative entity, but once we scored the responses pursuant to the criteria that was prescribed in the RFQ, the scoring transpired independent of each other. And from that process, we reconvened and we compiled the scores, where we got an aggregate or a total cumulative score respecting the individual scores of the committee members. And it is my representation today, after going through this arduous process, that Volkert is the successful respondent. But before I introduce Volkert to you, I'd like to give you an opportunity at this particular juncture, if you have any questions that I'd like to be able to respond to. Yes, Dr. Keith.
Yes. Mr. Rudolph.
Yes, ma'am.
I have the utmost respect for you. And the fact that you're delivering that has, you know, it means a lot. I'll just tell you that. I'm not rolling my eyes, but I kept this out. This is what was brought up to us today. It brought up, and my fellow board member, Brenda Doremus Coleman, thanked everybody for the internal buy-in and the external buy-in, okay, on communications. And that is the problem, at least with me, because we are 7 ladies that do different businesses, and we get information the day before or the day of. Your email is dated 2/25/21. Not a one of us knew anything about any of this until yesterday. There is a problem with transparency. I want to hear what Volkert says. I want to believe that it was fair. I want to believe that everybody's accountable and transparent. But when you hand me a packet right before you speak, or have somebody hand me a packet and expect me to make a vote tonight, it's almost, to me, ridiculous. It's criminal. It's criminal to me for these ladies to make a decision that we would have to trust. I like the way you came about it. You said y'all went into independent offices, but I'm gonna hush here, but I have so much more I want to say, because this all deals with our ad valorem taxes, okay? When you're putting out $150 million ad valorem taxes and you're going to give it to a company that's not local, one, I have a problem with it. When I first heard these 3 people, I think you said HGM, I wrote it down. I'm going to go home tonight immediately and look it up. I've looked up, I'm not trying to push TCU. Hey, I hated TCU at first until I actually sat down with them and they're going, lady, what is your problem with us? And I finally kind of bought into what they were telling me. I'm not saying I even want TCU. I just feel that there should be further investigation and that the board should have been a part of it. If there were members of the board that were, I wasn't. And so that's what brings me question. All I'm asking is we look into the process. That's it, and I'll hush it this time.
Dr. Keith, as you know, I customarily submit a bid report on a monthly basis as ongoing operations of my department. I have the formal responsibility for administering Title 16, which is the Alabama Competitive Bid Law, and also assist the Department of Operations, Mr. Anderson, in the administration of Title 39, Alabama Public Works Law. Okay, so my formal responsibilities is to provide consultation to my colleagues, administrators, to the board, to the superintendent, to all parties as part of the administrative process. You alluded to some concerns that are not actually predicated in the code. For example, when it comes to giving notice to the public under Title 16, I am only required to affix that notice on a bulletin board outside my immediate office space. I meet the requirement for board policy, and I meet the requirement for the statute. We went beyond, as you can read in my email correspondence to the Department of Communications. If I could direct your attention to that, I'm sure you may have read it, because it was quite a lengthy thread, but what was important, I wanted to have assurances that we advertise to the public adequately, to all stakeholders. There are specific entities that scan public agencies, governmental agencies, looking for opportunities to bid. Okay? 2. Thirdly, transparency is important to all of us. But it's two different, there's a line of demarcation with your concerns in the administration of the board. I can unequivocally assert that we were transparent in the process. Now, relative to your notification, when I go to the public, the website, et cetera, that's public notification.
Okay, but here's my deal. When I see the transparency that you feel, but like they said, internally, this has been our biggest concern for the last 6 months. We've met, we've talked, we said, hey, that's what we need is the internal transparency. So what it makes me do is go investigate what you're doing. I get on the internet, and when you find things, which I'm not going to bring up now unless it goes there, but when you look up some of this information and you find somebody you chose has internet articles that are proof of lawsuits, I'm sorry. As a board member, I'm going to question it. I hear good things about every company except, like I said, I didn't know the third one. I've heard the ones that are coming up are they scored 8 out of 500 companies. Okay, that's good. But there's also some other things that I'm not saying which one. I'm just saying there's a process. And when you're not, in my process, if I'm interviewing, I want to know, what's your cost? What are you paying me? What are your fees? My understanding is nobody asked that. That's a big deal when you're talking about $150 million ad valorem taxes. It's a big deal to me. And I'm just saying that.
Let me address just a small portion of your question about fees. Anything that is recommended to the board that we pay them will be brought to the board for approval. That has not been done. We just simply looked at qualifications, and that was what this process was about, to go through and, as part of our roles, superintendent and staff, to go through, just a minute, please, let me finish. Okay, thank you. Our job is to go through and bring you information. And then when there is time to vote, then our job is to give you a recommendation based on what we see and based on the process that we use. So we're not at the point of recommending any kind of fee to you if we make a recommendation tonight. I just want to make that clear.
Okay, but here's the deal. You can look on the consider for approval. Why would we be considering for approval authority for you to negotiate a fee of a service if we haven't already made our decision?
Well, we have made our decision that this is the company that we want to recommend to you as the management firm. We have not recommended a fee, and if we do not come to agreement on a fee, I would not be comfortable unless I got your approval as a board. So that is the next step. That would be the next step. Right now, we're at the first step.
Jana?
Is this the time to talk about this, or is it when it comes on the agenda in the regular board meeting when it's recommended? Is that when we talk about stuff, or can I talk about some stuff now?
I think you can talk about it now.
Okay. I have a whole list of stuff. First, I don't see in here the other two companies. You said there were 3 companies that filled out that RFQ, and what were the other 2?
TCU.
Okay.
And HPM.
HPM.
Yes.
And TCU.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, H as in Harry, P as in Paul.
Okay. So there were only 3 that applied. Is that what you?
We only received 3 responses.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I too have some concerns with Volkert and a couple of things. I think the biggest one that I have a concern with, I'm not sure TCU and HPM, but we have gone through a year of hell trying to get a property tax passed in this community. And, there's got to be another contractor that's local, or at least within the river region. And I personally have a problem with somebody who's not in our community and who did not help us get to where we are today. So that's my first and foremost. The second thing, I think several of the board members did some research this afternoon, and there were lawsuits there in Birmingham and in Mobile and in Priceville. Some of the things that Volkert signed in their contracts that they did not fulfill. One particularly in Mobile that concerned me is that the elementary school, because of the leaky roof that Volkert was not fixing, they had to have rain drills, and they were taught where to put buckets in their classrooms so that they would not get wet or it wouldn't ruin the floor. That may have been 10 years ago. I think, let's say it was in 2010. I have a real problem with that. That they would, and maybe y'all didn't know that when you were considering them or when you were, vetting them and grading them on scoring them. I'm not sure what how you scored them or anything, but to me, that would be a huge red flag if there were 3 different school districts in the last 10 years that Volkert had some very negative press about it. Let's see if I had anything else on here.
Janet, can I make a suggestion? Why don't we save our questions, let them do their presentation, and then let us ask you questions?
Well, that's why I asked you if this was the time for me to talk and ask questions. You said yes, so that's
no,
what
it
I
was, but you're going to have specific questions for them, and I think we should allow them to do their presentation and then directly ask them the questions. What's time for, if let's allow them to do their presentation.
Yeah, my presentation has really concluded, so I'm prepared to engage in the question. Mr. Watts, would you like to offer any?
I just want to state that a process of recommending a program manager is pretty much the way we've done this. And I want to just say, board members, we've spent hundreds of millions of dollars in renovations and building schools and so forth. I went back, because I'm going to do my homework. I went back over the years to see exactly what has taken place, the process or whatever, and that wasn't one. There was not a process, well, let me put it this way, at least there was not a written process that I ever saw that took place. I also want to say, as it relates to our being public about this, I know I mentioned something about the RFQ over the last 2 or 3 board meetings over the last 2 or 3 months, and talked about that we were advertising for a program manager, that the RFQ was put on the website, that it was even extended and so forth. So it's been made very, very public that this was out there. And organizations had an opportunity to go on our website, to respond if they chose to. So it was made very, very public as it relates to the RFQ. Again, as Dr. Moore stated, that usually after the program manager is selected, superintendent negotiates and her team negotiates with the program manager, and they bring that back to the board for the board's approval. And that's usually how those situations work.
Okay. Is this question time? I'm sorry, I'm so confused. I'm sorry. Okay. Was there any research done on the history of what Volkert had done in other school districts?
Yes, in fact, if I might.
And was that was that a concern for y'all?
Might I have an opportunity to respond? Yes, I was acutely aware of the litigation that Volkert was involved in Mobile. In fact, there was a settlement. So as a condition to a settlement, it's basic that no party admits culpability. Okay? So the Mobile case resolved itself in a settlement, not a jury decision. It's a legal distinction between the two.
And we're also aware, and I'll let Volkert speak for themselves, we also are aware that over $1 billion worth of program management work has been done by Volkert since this thing took place.
Successfully.
And I believe that Volkert has done more program management construction work for school districts, more so than anybody in the state of Alabama. So we wanted to make sure that we was getting a company that we felt comfortable with, that was reputable. And I want to just say that as the CSFO, my number one priority is ensuring that when the superintendent makes a recommendation for anybody, that we get the goods or the product that we're paying for. That's number one. Number two, or these may coincide, may be close together, is that we always ensure that we are above board on any recommendation, that we're above board, that we're going to make sure that there's no legal problems and so forth with whatever we recommend. And then, of course, as our board member has alluded to, we do want to make sure, because as I stated before, I was kind of surprised that we never had a minority participation policy here in Montgomery Public Schools. And so the superintendent and I started talking about this probably over a year ago, because we knew the need for that. And so we wanted to ensure that whoever we brought in had a history of ensuring that minority participation was just as important to them, or was important to them, as it is to us. So those were three of the things that we wanted to ensure, Madam President.
And Ms. Bailey, as part of my extensive research relative to the resident project management firm, I would invite you to review or research issues in phase 1 and phase 2. And I won't belabor the board articulating what those issues were, but they are part of the public record. Secondly, with respect to Title 16 and Title 39, we cannot give favorable consideration to a local respondent beyond 5%, and it's optional. It's not required. But we were not doing RFQ is a request for qualifications. We're not requesting prices for services or goods, but the request for qualifications to deliver the construction improvement program. Any other questions?
Yes, I do remember the conversations, because I apologize. I had asked several questions about the RFQs going out, and I do recall one response that I got that's hanging over my head right now. And it is that the reason the respondents are not usually brought to the board is we would have to bring too many before you. But the response tonight is that we only have 3. So I don't think that would have been too many to bring before us. But I will say that I definitely wanted to see and still want to see or hear the presentation. But I think what my colleagues are saying is that if we only had 3 respondents, we possibly could have seen 3 presentations and made more intelligent, informed decisions. But again, I do not want to shut down hearing what it is you have to present, but I think the concerns are very valid.
Well, Dr. Coben, we certainly can give immediate or grant immediate access to the respondent's proposal. Right now, those proposals exist in a restricted file, and they are going to remain in a restricted file in accordance to regulation until the board takes action one way or the other, up or down. Okay? Obviously, you as a governing body is entitled to have access to those responses. So, Dr. Moore, I would like to, with your permission, to just provide a link to all board members, if that's your wish, and they would be able to view each respondent's proposal.
Okay, here's the deal, Marvin, Mr. Rudolph. How is that
Marvin.
fair? How is that fair? How does one company get to come in here personally what would you feel if you were those other two companies that they went, oh, you can go find the link, okay?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear your last part.
If your response is, oh, can we get the board members to go look at a link? I don't want to hear a link. I don't think she said she wanted to hear a link. We want to hear a human being. I feel like I just punched a phone that said, press 1 if you want this, press 2 if you want this, and press 3. I want to press 0, okay? I want to hear everybody. That's what I want.
Dr. Keith, with all due respect, that has never been the process for the for the former administration of an RFP. Yes, Dr.
Let me
Moore.
interject,
Yes.
please.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just say this publicly. There's been a lot of lobbying that has occurred over the past few days and weeks, even months, prior to us even putting out an RFQ. And I think everybody in this room, for the most part, is probably aware of that. I have to say kudos to the staff that was very diligent in doing their due diligence in looking at this in a fair-minded way. Sure, we can go on the internet or somewhere and search people, companies, all kinds of things. I would even say to us here in this group that in many ways we have to be careful about good name and character, because there are probably some things that I can tell you about some other companies that you are not aware of, and that I, through my just walking through and looking at some buildings, saw some things and thought, how in the world did that happen? I could do that. I will not do that in this meeting tonight. But I will tell you, in looking at experience and in looking at production, looking at the amount of work that has been done extensively, and looking at the process again, which I think is super important for us to say to this board, that we did use a process. We did not go out and just select somebody. And anybody and everybody who wanted to apply to present an RFQ could do so. In this case, we had 3 people. It could have been more than 3, but in this case, we only had 3 who felt like they met the qualifications to do this job. So I will say, with all due respect to the board and to your questions, that I can assure you that we did not do anything that was not above board. Now, I think the lobbying that has occurred probably has contributed to the concern. I would like to also add this one little bit. We won't receive ad valorem money until October of '23. In the meantime, we need to do some studies. We need to look at our facilities and the conditions of those facilities, and we need to do at least some demographic studies so that whenever money comes to us, however it happens to come, we will be in a position to work with a company to start doing some of the construction type work that we need to do, and also the student achievement things that we want to do. But again, a reminder, I know that the ad valorem is important, and I certainly appreciate it as your superintendent who said, look, this is not going to work, 10 meals, we've got to do something. Board members, Ms. Smith and others who said, we've got to do something, and we did. And all of the people who went out and supported that, we appreciate it. But please keep in mind, when we talk about ad valorem and those who supported it and those who didn't, and what's going to happen down the road, October 23, probably fiscal year, I should say, 24 is when we'll start to get those funds. We want to prepare before that so that we will at least be ready to roll when some of those monies start to come in. That is what this process where we are right now is all about, so that we can do that. I would like to say, since we do have a presentation, that if we could at this time allow Volker to make their presentation, and then if there are other issues that you want to bring up with me and the group that did the interviews, we would be more than happy to do as much as we can to accommodate you. Thank you.
I would just like to say one thing before we go any further. This is a lot of information to absorb. And, I too think that it's kind of unfortunate that we received the information in such short period of time prior to being, asked to take a vote and to support or what have you. So I just, I would just like for us to consider moving forward to be more timely in our communication or more open in the communication, or inclusive, maybe it's the better word. Because when you're talking about making a decision that involves this much money, 5 minutes of looking at something to me is not enough time. So I really would like for us to consider moving forward, doing a little bit better job of allowing us to digest the information.
Board Member Brown, or well, I'll ask that later. I'll ask it later.
Okay, may I take this opportunity to introduce to the board and to members of the public leadership of Volkert, Leon Balcom. I'm going to allow him to come forward, if you would, or Norman Hill, and introduce your colleagues and your team, okay? Give me just a second.
Good evening, Chair Wheel, other board members, and Dr. Moore. We thank you again for this opportunity to introduce ourselves and come before you. Can you just let it up for me? Once again, I want to thank you. My name is Norman Hill. I'm a vice president with Volkert, where I've been with Volkert for more than 20 years, and we do thank you for giving us this opportunity to present ourselves and our experience. Just a little about Volkert. We are a 95-year-old company. We are headquartered in Mobile. We've been in the Montgomery area for more than 25 years. We have 30 employees here. We're an Alabama corporation. We're an employee-owned company. And we're, as Mr. Watts said, Volkert, we have, in the engineering record, we're number 8 out of the top 500 companies in engineering services. But in the state of Alabama, in K-12, we're the #1 program construction management firm in the state of Alabama. And as you mentioned, we have performed billions of dollars of successful school projects here in Alabama. Joining me tonight is some of my colleagues and our team. I'll ask Leon Barkin, who is our program manager, who will introduce our team and talk more specifically about who we are, what we, and what our capabilities are. Thank you, Leon.
Thank you, Madam President, Dr. Moore, board members. I'm Leon Barkin. I'm Chief Operating Officer for Volkert, and I'll also head our program and construction management practice countrywide. Before the presentation, I asked Ms. J to not bring the screen down because I wanted to look at you all in the face to address some of the questions that were raised tonight. The litigation matter that was raised by Dr. Keith and then Ms. Bailey happened almost 2 decades ago. It did occur. There was a settlement. You all obviously clearly read about it. It's not something that we hide from or try to put under the rug. It's frankly something that we've grown from, and our clients, who are too numerous to count, have benefited from. We've done literally billions of dollars of K-12 management, a lot of that in Alabama. Since then, it's millions of square feet of schools we've built successfully for hundreds of thousands of students. And I will say that we get paid to say good things about ourselves. The education community, certainly in Alabama, is a small one. And we would not be continually rehired over and over again and do more K-12 management than all other firms that do what we do combined. We do more than all other firms in this state combined by doing bad work and not doing what we say we're going to do. And so we commit to you tonight that we're going to do exactly what we say we're going to do with respect to DB participation, with respect to maintaining our budgets, with respect to maintaining our quality, and with respect to making sure that this community is fully bought in to the success of this program. We have managed the largest programs in the state of Alabama. The team we're bringing to you this evening is one of those teams. And as Norman mentioned, we are local. We've been here over 25 years, longer than the other firms have even been in business that have applied to do your other work. And then beyond Volkert, Dr. Moore, we appreciate the fact that you all are putting together a DB participation policy. We've anticipated that as a desire of this community because we know that's what's needed. And so we're committing to comply with your policy, and not only comply, but comply with local successful firms. And so to segue that, I want to go ahead and introduce the rest of our team. We have Tania Johns. Ms. Johns was the very first team member we added to this program, to our team, and we did that because we know that communication to the community is the highest priority. We know that this is an incredibly important referendum, and the community, not only your parents of your students, but also the business leaders, have put a lot of faith in the school system to make sure this program is successful. We know that that has got to be communicated effectively. Ms. Johns will be leading that effort for us. We have Mike Kemp with KMS. Mr. Kemp also has a local presence here, and we have done hundreds of millions of dollars of work with Mr. Kemp, actually the largest building program in the state of Alabama, in the history of Alabama, 2059, we delivered with Mr. Kemp, and he has a very successful program management practice on his own, does work throughout the country as well as in Alabama, and not only will be helping us with the project management aspects of the project, but also the DB participation program that we have a very evolved and successful one we're going to implement for you. So we're very excited about having Mr. Kemp on our team. And then finally, we have Mr. William Rumpf. Mr. Rumpf is with KWZ Contracting, a local, highly respected contracting firm. Local is Montgomery, and he's been here for a number of years. Mr. Rumpf will assist us with making sure that we've got not only quality contractors, but good participation by DBE and local contractors. We want to make sure that the funds that have been raised by the taxpayers to fund this program go back into the local community. So with that, I'm going to introduce the Volkert team members, which is Glenn Slater. He will be the program manager on this program. Mr. Slater is successfully completing the Jefferson County Schools program. It's a $275 million program. And then along with Mr. Slater is Tracy Williams. Tracy will be the assistant program manager. Both Tracy and Glenn have been with Volkert for over 15 years, and both have managed billions of dollars worth of K-12 constructions in Alabama. Leon Barkin, B-A-R-K-A-N. Yes, ma'am. In addition to those team members, and we have an entire staff, as you'll see when we present, we have George Talbot with us. George is head of our governmental relations, has a tremendous background in public relations and community outreach, and George will be assisting Tania as well as the rest of the team to make sure that the community is fully bought in and that we understand as your program manager what the community wants to see in your projects. And then Philip Russell. Philip has been with us from the very beginning on our program management side. He has a background in K-12 facility management. He formerly had the same position that Chad did with the former school system and has managed billions of dollars with the K-12 work throughout the state of Alabama. So with that, and then Ms. Bailey, just to address the other issues you raised, that was the only suit that we've ever had with a client, period, on K-12 work, the only one. The one you raised in Priceville is because we had to make a hard decision and have a designer terminated because of their work. He ended up suing. That suit was thrown out because it had no merit. So if we could, Ms. Jade, if we could go ahead and bring the I think I need to tell them when to switch the slides, right? If we could go ahead and go to the next slide, and I know we're pressed for time, folks, we'll try to go through this really quickly. Okay, next slide, please. We've already gone through the team, so I'd like to go to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. So I know you all may not be able to see this. It's a lot of different folks on it, but the bottom line is we're bringing a very experienced team, actually just about our entire Jefferson County program team, which is finishing up work this summer, will be assigned to this program. In addition to that, as I mentioned, we'll have significant support from our sub-consultants, from Kent Management, KWZ, as well as Ms. Johns. And they'll be providing additional project management staff, document control staff, public relations staff. And in addition to that, I did not mention Dr. Steve Salmon is also on our team. Dr. Salmon is a renowned demographer. As we go through the process, we're going to outline for delivering your program the capital planning, facility assessment, demographic study as a critical component to a successful roadmap to this program. Dr. Salmon is the most accurate demographer we've ever worked with. He's done lots of different demographic studies for lots of different school systems across the state of Alabama as well as the rest of the country, and we have a high level of confidence in his ability to provide us outstanding information. Next slide, please. As I mentioned in my opening comments, we've managed more K-12 construction than all of our competition combined. These are the largest programs in the state of Alabama. And I want to point out another thing, that we have been not only hired once, but rehired by these clients over and over and over again. Again, the reason why they rehire us because we do what we say, the quality of our work speaks for itself, and the integrity of how we operate speaks for itself. So Birmingham City Schools, that was the largest K-12 building program in the history of the state of Alabama, $450 million program. We had 29% DBE participation on that program, 29. It's the highest DBE percentage of any non-federally funded K-12 program ever in the state of Alabama. Jefferson County Schools, $275 million. As I mentioned, we're finishing that program up this summer. Alabaster City Schools, $125 million, still working for them on various projects. Madison City Schools, it's a $170 million program. We've done all their work over the past decade and are continuing to work for them now. And then Morgan County Schools, we've done over $100 million worth of work for them, including the Priceville High School project, Ms. Bailey, which we are continuing to work for them, for that school system in delivery of their projects. Next slide, please. Our partners, some of the relevant experience, KMS has done work for Tuskegee University, KWZ also worked for Tuskegee University. Ms. Johns was instrumental in the passage of the tax referendum and the Vote for Montgomery Public Schools campaign. Dr. Salmon worked on the demographic study for Jefferson County Schools with us, along with the numerous other school systems we worked for, such as Madison County Schools and Madison City Schools. Next slide, please. So Birmingham, as I mentioned, is a $450 million program over 10 years, 3.5 million square feet of facilities, The program not only had the highest minority participation in the history of the state, it was also millions of dollars under budget. As a result of that, we were able to do additional projects that were not originally planned by the school system at the time, which included a complete technology refresh for every single educational facility in the school system. Next slide, please. Jefferson County Schools, 23 projects, almost 1,300,000 square feet, lots of new schools, renovations, additions, HVAC upgrades, a whole variety of different projects. That program is $275 million and is completing this summer. Next. Alabaster City Schools, one of the largest high schools in the state, is the new Thompson High School. Certainly the largest site work package we've ever done on a school in the state. It's 305-acre site, some 2 million cubic yards of soil that was moved on that project, and again, on time and budget with a very high level of quality. Next. Madison City Schools, we've gone through numerous phases of schools for Madison City, the new James Clemens High School, renovations of Bob Jones High School, numerous additions, new elementary schools, and renovations for that school system. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Morgan County, Priceville High School we heard about earlier, which we've successfully completed. And in addition, since then, numerous other projects for that school system, including additions, new schools, and renovations. And so these combined are the largest programs that have been done in the state of Alabama. And as I mentioned again, I want to reiterate, not only were we hired once, but we were rehired over and over again as our clients found new funding sources and had new facility needs. Next slide. So we've heard a lot about the DBE participation this evening. We know that's incredibly important to this particular school system. And I want to say that we clearly understand your goals with respect to that. We know that building the schools obviously is important, improving your physical facilities is incredibly important, but also making sure that the tax dollars for the folks that are funding this capital program go back into the community. We found there's actually been studies done on several of our programs where 5 to 10 times the economic impact is received to the community as what was expended by the school system. And so just some examples of our success: East Baton Rouge Parish Schools in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. We had a 20% goal. We had a 25% achievement. Birmingham City Schools had a 25% goal. We had a 29% achievement. And even though Jefferson County Schools had no goal, we had a 10% achievement to date on that particular school system. So our plan, I'm going to lay out our plan. I'm going to ask Mr. Kemp to come up and talk a little bit about his success at UAB as well. Essentially, what we need to do is remove the barriers to entry to make sure that disadvantaged firms are on a level playing field. To do that, for Birmingham, for example, we implemented the very first owner-controlled insurance program in the history of Alabama for K-12. And what that did was it took the cost of insurance away as a variable for the construction community to be able to compete on a level playing field with non-minority contractors, with majority contractors. Not only did that save the school system money, provided a higher limit of insurance to protect that client, but it removed the cost of insurance as a variable when DBE contractors were bidding the work. As a result of that, we had tons of additional new DBE contractors participate. Many of them were successful. The challenge on the construction side is, as Mr. Rudolph mentioned, you do have to deal with Title 39, which stipulates you've got to take the low bid. You can't just pick and choose who you want. But we were able to, again, make those contractors more competitive and thereby allow them to be successful. Education, I think I heard that earlier with Ms. Brown in her comments to Dr. Moore. Education is incredibly important. We find that many DBE contractors are not able to participate because they don't know how to get bonding, how to get insurance, how to bid projects, all those various things. We have a very evolved mentoring program and a seminar program where we actually teach contractors how to do this. We've been hired by places like Southern University to teach our program to their various communities and their students, and their contractors. And so our program is highly successful and effective. And then DBE outreach, we'll hit the streets and we'll recruit contractors, designers, architects, engineers to participate in this program and get their buy-in, understand when they have to submit, understand the requirements they have to be successful, and we'll go recruit them, we'll mentor them, we'll put them under our wing and make sure that they're successful. And then, unlike on the construction side, we can have goals, but we can't have quotas. That's just not legal on non-federally funded work. We can make requirement on the professional services side, and we will do that. Whatever the school system's goals are, we will make sure that those are implemented in the professional service contracts, and we will monitor and negotiate those contracts to ensure that they meet those various participation goals. And then one of the ways we've really been successful in maximizing participation is on the furniture, fixtures, and equipment side. There are lots of procurement cooperatives that I know the school system is a part of, the state of Alabama is a part of, that allows us to go ahead and pick off of those bid lists, negotiate those prices down from the listed price, but able to maximize DB participation in the delivery and supply of those services. And that's been an incredibly successful process for us. And then Dr. Moore, I know, has introduced your DB participation policy. We have a lot of experience with helping our clients develop and maximize those, and we're happy to work with Dr. Moore, Mr. Watts, and Mr. Rudolph to get you a very robust program that is going to be not only words on paper, but successful. So with that, I'm going to let Mr. Kemp come up and talk a little bit about his success on the program at UAB.
Great. Thank you, Leon. Madam Chair, Dr. Moore, thank you all for all the board members for allowing us the opportunity to come and present today. You know, as I listened to Leon's thought process around the DBE portion of the program that we're proposing, you know, one of the things that I would share is, being a minority-owned company myself, a lot of the things that I've dealt with as a business owner, I bring real perspective to the table. So it's not theory, it's things that I've encountered, from insurance to access to training to all those things. So I say that to say that when UAB brought us in, we were initially hired as their program manager for their small public works. So small public works was basically all their projects that didn't have to go to the board level for approval. And so they had a desire to increase their spend from 7% at the time to a number that was well above that. So we sat with them, the head of facilities, the leadership at UAB, and basically mapped out a plan very similar to what Volkert has administered and some of the other opportunities they've been involved in. And so looking at some of those barriers, insurance, access to capital, training, partnerships, all those different things. And so we basically helped them map that process out over a period of about 8 months. And so after that 8th month, we went through a process of identifying the vendors, spending time with them, finding out where they were as an organization, what projects they really could participate in, and then aligning them with the proper partners, whether it's general contractors, whether it's other subs, et cetera. And so with that, fast forward, after about 18 months, those numbers went from 7% to about 28%. Those are measurable numbers that you can call them and check with facilities, and they're still administering the program. Now, what happened in that process is that after building out the actual program, we turned it back over to them in June of last year. So we helped them build it out, got it to a point to where they could administer it. So I'm assuming very similar working with Volkert, that the program that Montgomery Public Schools wants to administer, we help build out, we turn it back over, then it's administered going forward. But it has framework that has relevant input from entities like us and our other partners on the team that can really speak to what the challenges are And, I'll say this, I'll take a point of privilege, and Leon, to say this is that, Leon touched it, is that KMS and Volker have partnered. This is not our first time working together. And so when we worked on the project in downtown Birmingham, that was the first partnership that as a firm we had ever done. So all the work that we do, we're the prime. We do work for entities and do work all over the country, in the US and in Europe. And so for us to be partnered with Volker, I will say that I've seen their commitment up close and personal related to their commitment to the DBE process and the MBE involvement in a significant manner on the program. So with that, I can firmly say that I think we could put a program in place that would definitely speak to the need of minority participation. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. As I mentioned, the proposed team we're bringing to you are ones that have been with the company for a long time, and they are seasoned professionals with the delivery of K-12 projects. They're not builders of tire plants or chemical plants or pharmaceutical facilities. They build schools. That's what our team does, period, paragraph. And these folks are the very ones who are successfully delivering a program right up the street. Many of them live here in the Montgomery area. And as I mentioned, we've had a major presence and a major office here for a quarter of a century. We are local. Next slide, please. So real quickly, we've got a 4-phase approach. I'd like to go ahead and go through these quickly if I could. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The first phase is incredibly important, the facility assessment capital planning phase. We've done this for practically every large program that we've ever embarked on for our clients. We know you guys know you have a need. You obviously passed a referendum to improve your facilities, but you may not know exactly what that need is, where your population trends are exactly, where you need consolidation, addition, new construction, renovations, what have you. So we'll put a very experienced team of assessors and demographers in place to do that. I wanted to point out that Volker created the State Department of Education's facility assessment program some 20 years ago. And so we follow a very similar process to what the State Department does, and understand and know how to catalog, document, and identify what the needs are. And so from that assessment, the demographics, and the physical understanding of what the needs are, we then actually put physical programs together for every space that's going to be needed in the program. And that's how we can put together very accurate budgets for your projects. We're not just saying we're going to build an elementary school and it's going to be this much. We know every single space that's going to go into that elementary school. And because we bid work throughout the state every single day, we have a very outstanding database of current prices and can provide very accurate budgeting information to the school system to make decisions. And that's why our projects continually come in budget and on time. As a part of that process, obviously, we're going to interview the CHAD staff, all the maintenance folks, understand what kind of building systems they're comfortable with and want to work on. We're also going to make sure that we interview your child nutrition folks, your transportation folks, your PE folks, your curriculum folks, all those various folks that the building needs to work for them. And every one of our clients does things a little bit differently. Education, for the most part, is the same, but everybody's got preferences for how they want their facilities oriented, the amenities they want in them. All that is very important for us to know because all that affects your budget. And then additionally, as I mentioned, Tania Johns is going to be continually interacting with the community. We're going to be making continual presentations to the community. I can tell you in Birmingham, there were 99 neighborhoods we had to go to just to get a project approved. We understand what it's like to get community buy-in, to get their feedback. We want to make sure that the community as a whole is happy with the products that they're getting. Next slide, please. During that phase, concurrently with that, we're going to go start doing the procurement of various services, specifically your professional services. And as I mentioned, the DB participation requirement is going to be weaved all throughout that procurement process. We're also going to go through setting up all the budgets. We'll will be able to reconcile with your accounting department for every penny spent on this program and can account for that. We will implement our internet-based management system, which we use eBuilder. We've used that system for almost 20 years now, one of the largest users throughout the country. Our experts on that system, and through that system, we have real-time management of the projects. All our project managers, Chad's staff, if he wants, can be involved in it. Mr. Watt's staff from the accounting side is involved with it. Every bit of information related to that program we catalog in this system. It provides accountability, it provides protection against claims and lawsuits, and we can account for every penny spent on this program, which is incredibly important as these are tax dollars that are funding this program. Next. During the pre-construction phase, once you all approve the projects that we bring to you as a recommendation, that those will be formally approved by the board. We'll lay out a master schedule for the entire program so you all know, your constituents know when these projects are going to be delivered and how. And then we'll start assigning architects with your approval to these various projects, and we meet with them on a weekly basis. We want to make sure that the program that you all approved, the design criteria that you all approved, the amenities that you all approved are being implemented in these designs so that a project on the east side of the county has the same amenities and is consistent with the projects on the west side of the county. We know that's incredibly important, that there be parity in terms of amenity and access to all the various students in this county. Again, community outreach, we want to make sure that the community is communicated with on exactly the product that they're going to be getting. And sometimes there are tough conversations, but we find that honesty and openness is the best way to deal with it. And we explain and have a back and forth with the community about what we can and cannot do, why the decisions are being made, all with the intention of making sure that the community is happy with what they're getting and there's buy-in to the various projects. Again, DB involvement laced throughout the entire process. Next slide, please. During the construction phase, these projects have to be hard bid. That's the law in the state of Alabama. We will help the architects and the purchasing department do that. We will foster DB participation through our outreach program and making sure that the various subcontractors and vendors are familiar with who's bidding the projects and are participating. But then we also make sure that the quality of the work that you all are paying for is being met. And we do that by assigning project managers to every project who are there with the architects, with the testing agencies, with the various engineers, making sure that these projects are done in the quality that you all expect them to be, done on time and in budget. Next. And then we know that we can't just turn the keys over to you when the projects are done. These are complicated buildings. They're even more complicated now than they were just a couple of years ago. We want to make sure that the maintenance staff, the staff at the school, are very trained on the operation and maintenance of these facilities, that all the various warranty information is preserved and all the various attic stock and those things are taken care of. We also want to make sure that the staff is moved into these facilities correctly, that all your computers are installed, the furniture is installed, all of their goods and books and supplies are moved in a very orderly basis to make sure that when they open the school up, it's ready to go. And so what we're proposing is a very soup to nuts, wholly inclusive process. And then not every building is not perfect. That's why you have warranty period. We stay on throughout the warranty period for these projects. Our project managers know the staff, know the maintenance staff, know the teachers and the principal, and know the contractors and subcontractors better than anybody. And so we're there with your local school staff to make sure that if there's an issue, if there's heat's not working in room 105, they're the first folks that are called. We have a very organized process for documenting that, making sure that those issues are resolved. And at the end of the one-year warranty period, we walk through with the contractors, the designers, the local school staff to make sure that every one of those warranty items have been cleared up before we let the contractors off the hook. So in conclusion, we know that we've got to build these schools on time and in budget. That's a given. We also know that we've got to make sure that we've got a credible and highly successful minority participation program, that the folks that are funding this school construction program benefit from the tax dollars that they're expending. We understand that. We are going to do that. And then, again, we don't get rehired by our clients because we fail. We consistently bring our projects in on time and in budget. Thank you.
Madam President, I want to thank you, Mr. Barkin, Mr. Kemp, Slater, Williams, Russell, Talbot, and if I left out anybody, I'm sorry. But I think some points I want to make. I really appreciate what you said, your first comment to own that this happened 20 years ago and that you learned from it really made me do an about face. And you have to understand, I was never against Talbot. I have no filter. And God, if I was supposed to stand up here and say what I've done in my past or what the media has put out there on the front page of me at least twice already, and I have to live for that, you learn from that. And I've tried to calm myself down. Some of the things that I've been very impressed with what you have said is that you work with the community. You want to be consistent with what the East Side is doing and what the West Side. That's one of the problems in Montgomery. We tend to neglect the West Side. And the fact that you are interested in coming in and being consistent and you're a new face, I'm impressed with that. My whole issue with today was that you have to understand, and I have to commend our superintendent for calling out the elephant in the room. She basically said, hello, there's been lobbying, and it has been. But the lobbying's been in the last 24 hours, and it's just as much lobbying for you as it is against you. And you have to understand, with no filter, I don't mind being as humble and trying to explain to you that when you see people that you really trust, like I said, Marvin Rudolph, I totally trust him. The 4 people that voted are Arthur Watts. These people that voted and went in their offices, I have the highest esteem for all 4 of them. And I'm not just saying that. People that know me know I don't have a lot of high esteem for trusting people. And from what I've seen, when you look at people lobbying that you really trust and then you have other people lobbying that you don't trust, for me, you get really confused. And in that confusion, you want time. Timing is a huge piece of this. It's easy to overlook what happened 20 years ago and say, hey, they learned from that. It's also quite impressive to see that you are 8th among 500 companies. It's also impressive to see that you have minorities, which one of our board members points out quite a bit. So I'm impressed. I just don't want you to leave here thinking, well, that noodlehead up there is just already. I'm embarrassed that I feel like I've attacked you, and I don't know you enough to judge you. I just wanted that time, and that was it. But so far, what I've seen, especially the pictures, they're phenomenal. And your reputation is phenomenal. And I wanted to genuinely apologize if I've made any of your team, which I feel has made an effort to be here. I would just like to see what the other 2, in person have to say too, so that we really have been fair and impartial. And I think you would want that if you had heard that we had listened to them, but not you. That's the only concern I had.
And thank you for your comments, Dr. Keith. The only thing I would add to that is we obviously compete for this type of work all over the country all the time. The process that the school system followed is very consistent with what we see throughout, and so they were very regimented, very organized. I think the things that they asked for got to the root of whether or not we were qualified to do the work, whether or not we had a true DB participation plan, and showed evidence of our success. And again, we're very proud of our record, and I know I can say this without hesitation. We're happy to give 100% of our references, 100% of our references across the country for our program management work. And I'm very confident that they will do nothing but give glowing reviews of our work.
And just so you'll know, my comment, if I was against you, I went on the internet because I'd heard you were not local. Well, I found a local number. I called the local number. I spoke to a Nancy. And then she gave me the local number because I was like, this is out of town. But I really am somebody that does investigate, and I think we all are. And I think the main concern is just we just feel, and I know Mr. Rudolph says, well, Lisa, that's not a part of the process. To us as board members, some of us feel like it is a part of the process. We should know. We want to know what, if we're voting, I want to know, I know what I voted for. I don't want a rubber stamp. And that's something I'm very, very much opposed to. And when you only have less than 24 hours to look at something and you find out, yeah, there's an email written back on 2/28, you still like, well, why didn't I know this? And that's where I'm saying we're confused. But and I'm not going to interrupt again. I am impressed.
Thank you.
By what you have presented today.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
I'm not real sure if this is an appropriate time to ask such a question, and yes, it is getting late. I do apologize, but there's a bill in the legislature right now that is being fought that has to do with construction of K-12 and community colleges, constructions and buildings. And it's ironic that that came across to my attention, 24 to 48 hours ago. I would like to hear where you are, what you think about what's going on in the legislature, how that's going to relate to you or us. What is the impact on the decisions that we're making this week?
Okay, so I think the bill you're referring to is what some legislators are proposing for the Division of Construction Management, formerly known as the Building Commission. There's some, I guess the bill is requesting that the Division of Construction Management not be the authority having jurisdiction over certain public buildings, K-12 maybe being community colleges, higher ed, what have you. We honestly don't have an opinion or a position towards that, Dr. Coleman. We've worked with the Building Commission for decades. Back when Catherine Lynn was still there, she was a trusted advisor. She would call me for issues related to my opinion on things, whether it was for our particular projects or others that she had a question about. So we collaborated significantly on that and still remain friends, and she's in North Carolina now. And then same with Mr. Barnes, Frank Barnes. Frank and I talked today. And so nobody has more plans for review in front of the Division of Construction Management than we do every day. And so we have a need to make sure that our plans are being reviewed on time, because that's a major schedule impact to our clients and our projects. And so we've got a great relationship with them. As a matter of fact, we just hired their inspector from North Alabama who retired to help us with some work up in North Alabama for some of our clients. So I think if they're not going to be the authority having jurisdiction over your projects, over K-12, then I think the county permit office would have to. There would have to be some regulatory agency that would have to make sure that the plans are code compliant and that the construction is as well. In some states we work, they don't have that. They just have a fire marshal. I don't think that's necessarily in the best interest of the clients.
Any other questions? Jana?
Yeah, so Mr. Rudolph asked that I comment on our role with the State Department of Education. Again, we assisted the state, this is some time ago, with development of their facility assessment their capital program. I know every school system every year has got to submit their CIP to the state. You've got to submit that to the State Department of Education. We assisted the state with actually developing that program, and that's why our program for how we go about assessing facilities, developing capital plans is very much in line with the State Department of Education's process. And that's why we feel like it's a solid, well-tested, and highly accurate process.
I have just one question. As far as your, and